The stars shone bright against the deep black of space. Earth sat below, a blue jewel spinning quietly as it had for billions of years. On the Terran Defense Station bulwark, Admiral Alan Carter looked out through the large viewing window of his office. The station floated in orbit, a massive structure of metal and composite materials that represented humanity's first line of defense. Carter was a tall man with gray hair cut short in military fashion. Deep lines around his eyes showed both laughter and worry from his 30 years of service. He wore the dark blue uniform of the Terran Defense Force with 3 gold stars on each shoulder. His office was simple, but comfortable. A metal desk, a few chairs, and walls covered with pictures of ships he had served on throughout his career. Carter sighed as he turned away from the window. He sat at his desk and began to look through daily reports on his computer screen. After 3,000 years of peace in the galaxy, these reports were usually boring. Fuel usage, supply deliveries, training exercises, nothing that would cause anyone to worry. The Galactic Concord had maintained this peace for longer than humans, had been part of space civilization. Hundreds of alien species lived together, sharing technology, resources, and culture. Humans had joined only 500 years ago, making them one of the youngest members of this peaceful group. As Carter read through a report about engine repairs on patrol ships, a light on his desk began to flash red. The emergency communication system was activating. This almost never happened. "Accept incoming transmission," Carter said clearly. The air in front of his desk shimmered, and a 3-dimensional image of a woman appeared. She wore the formal clothes of a human ambassador, a simple blue suit with the Earth symbol on the collar. Her face showed clear signs of stress. "Admiral Carter, this is Ambassador Susan Miller calling from the Concord Central Council," she said, her voice shaking slightly. Carter sat up straighter. "Ambassador Miller, what's happening?" The image flickered slightly as Miller pushed hair from her face. "Sir, something unexpected has occurred. The Zivnar have just announced their withdrawal from the Galactic Concord." Carter felt surprise, but kept his face calm. The Zivnar were one of the oldest and most respected species in the galaxy. Their technology was advanced beyond most others, and their wisdom was often sought in matters of galactic importance. They had been founding members of the Concord 3,000 years ago. "That's concerning, Ambassador, but why the emergency call?" Carter asked. Miller took a deep breath. "Because they didn't just leave the Concord, Admiral. They've declared war on humanity. Specifically on us, not any other species." Carter blinked. This was beyond unexpected. It was almost unbelievable. "War? There hasn't been an actual war in the galaxy for 3,000 years. "I know, sir. The Council is in chaos. No one expected this, least of all from the Zivnar." Carter leaned forward. "Did they give a reason for this action?" "Yes," Miller nodded. "They claim that humans are destabilizing the cosmic balance with our expansion and technology development. According to their leaders, they have used some kind of prediction technology to see that humans will cause destruction throughout the galaxy within the next 100 years if we're not stopped now." Carter listened to this explanation with growing interest. The Zivnar were known for their ability to calculate probable futures, but this seemed extreme even for them. "What is their demand?" he asked. "Complete human submission to Zivnar control. They want us to stop all space exploration, reduce our technology use, and allow them to place guides in all human governments." Carter sat silently for a moment. Then, to Ambassador Miller's clear surprise, he began to chuckle softly. "Admiral, with respect, this is extremely serious," Miller said, her eyes wide. "The Zivnar have the most advanced fleet in the galaxy. They could reach Earth within days." Carter's small laugh grew until he was smiling widely. "I'm sorry, Ambassador. I don't mean to seem like I'm not taking this seriously." He composed himself, but the smile remained. "Has the Secretary General been informed?" "Yes. She's preparing a statement now. The other Concord species are meeting to decide their positions. Most seem shocked, but none have offered to stand with us yet." Carter nodded. "That's to be expected. No one wants to break 3,000 years of peace even to help us. He thought for a moment, then made a decision. Ambassador Miller, please call an emergency council meeting with all human representatives across the galaxy. Of course, Admiral. What should I tell them is the purpose? Carter's eyes twinkled with an odd mix of amusement and determination. Tell them it's to discuss our response to the Zivnar declaration of war. He paused, then added, and tell them to bring popcorn. Popcorn, sir? Miller looked confused. Yes, Ambassador, popcorn. This is going to be quite a show. After Miller's image disappeared, Carter pressed a button on his desk. Get me the Joint Chiefs of Staff Priority Alpha, he said to his computer. As he waited for the connection, he looked back out at Earth through his window. The Zivnar thought they knew humans. They thought they understood what humanity was capable of. Like most of the galaxy, they saw humans as young, somewhat primitive creatures who had been lucky enough to develop space travel and join the civilized societies of the stars. What the Zivnar and the rest of the galaxy didn't know, what humans had carefully hidden for 500 years, was the truth. Humanity had not shared everything when they joined the Concord, not even close. Carter's smile grew wider as he thought about the shock that was coming for the Zivnar. Their prediction technology might be impressive, but it had clearly missed something important. Humans had always been very good at keeping secrets. The emergency meeting with Earth's military leaders would begin in minutes. Plans that had sat waiting for centuries would finally be put into action. Not plans for war, but plans for revelation. As Admiral Carter prepared his notes for the meeting, alerts began coming in from the edge of the solar system. Zivnar ships had been spotted. They were coming much faster than expected. Carter wasn't worried. In fact, he was looking forward to it. The Zivnar had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had threatened the one species that had mastered the art of appearing harmless while hiding their true power. The war that was about to begin wouldn't be a war at all. It would be a demonstration, and humans, with their strange sense of humor that few alien species ever understood, were going to enjoy every minute of it. 3 days passed after the Zivnar declared war on humanity. The people of Earth went about their daily lives with an unusual calm. In parks, at work, and in homes, people discussed the news of alien war like they might talk about an upcoming sports match. There was excitement, but no fear. In the United Nations Space Command headquarters deep beneath the city of Geneva, Switzerland, General Olivia Wright watched the main screen with focused eyes. She was a strong woman in her 50s with short blonde hair and a uniform decorated with medals from her years of service. Around her, officers worked at their stations, but the room felt oddly relaxed. The giant screen showed the edge of the solar system. A fleet of alien ships had just appeared there. The ships looked like they were made of crystal, beautiful structures that bent light around them in strange ways. The largest ship was the size of Earth's moon. Zivnar fleet has entered the system, General, said Officer Greg Harper. He was young with dark skin and a serious face, though right now he was fighting to hold back a smile. Sensors count 67 major vessels and about 200 smaller craft. Wright nodded and took a sip from her coffee mug. On the mug were the words, "I'm silently judging your ship design." Right on schedule, she said calmly. Has the fleet taken any action yet? They're moving toward Mars at sub-light speed, General. They'll reach Mars orbit in about 6 hours. Wright tapped her fingers on the table. Around her, the command center hummed with activity, but no one showed signs of panic. Some officers were even smiling as they worked. They've sent a message, General, Harper announced, touching his earpiece. It's being broadcast on all channels to every human settlement in the system. Put it on screen, Wright ordered. The main display changed to show a Zivnar. They were tall beings with smooth blue skin that seemed to shimmer with inner light. They had 4 arms and large, intelligent eyes that looked like they contained stars. This particular Zivnar wore elaborate clothing that marked him as a high-ranking military leader. People of Earth, the alien began, speaking perfect English in a musical voice. I am Grand Admiral Vexkar of the Zivnar Dominion. For 3,000 years we have watched the galaxy live in peace. Now that peace is threatened by your uncontrolled development and expansion. The alien's star-like eyes narrowed. Our calculations show with 99.8% certainty that if humanity continues on its current path, disaster will come to all civilized species within 1 century. We cannot allow this. Grand Admiral Vexkar raised his upper arms in what seemed like a ceremonial gesture. We demand your immediate surrender and submission to Zivnar authority. Your technology development will be guided. Your expansion will be limited. This is necessary for the good of all beings in the galaxy. The alien paused, then added, "You have 1 Earth hour to respond before we demonstrate our power. This will be your only warning." The screen returned to showing the approaching fleet. General Wright took another sip of coffee. "Thoughts?" she asked the room. A strategic officer named Kevin Reed spoke up. "The Zivnar fleet is impressive by Concord standards, General. Their flagship alone has enough firepower to destroy a small moon, according to the information they've shared with the Concord over the years. And compared to our actual capabilities?" Wright asked with a small smile. Reed grinned. "About as threatening as a water balloon fight, ma'am." Wright nodded and stood up straight. "Officer Harper, prepare to send our formal response to the Zivnar fleet." Harper looked uncertain. "The response from the Secretary General, ma'am?" "No." Wright shook her head. "The other one." Harper's face broke into a wide smile. "Yes, General. 59 minutes after the Zivnar ultimatum, a simple message left Earth. It contained no words, just an image from human history. The image showed a cartoon character sitting in a theater, eating popcorn while watching a show with an amused expression. On the bridge of the Zivnar flagship, Grand Admiral Vexkar received the human response with confusion. "What is this?" he demanded of his communication officer. "What does it mean?" The officer, who had studied human culture, looked nervous. "It appears to be an entertainment reference, Admiral. Humans often eat this food called popcorn while watching performances. It suggests they see our threat as entertainment." Vexkar's blue skin darkened with anger. "They mock us? They treat our righteous intervention as a source of amusement?" "Would seem so, Admiral." Vexkar slammed all 4 of his hands down on the command console. "Begin the first phase of the attack. Teach these primitive beings the cost of their arrogance." Throughout the Zivnar fleet, weapons powered up. Their first attack would be an electromagnetic pulse designed to disable all human technology in the outer solar system. It was meant as a demonstration of power before the real destruction began. The pulse launched. It spread out in a massive wave of energy that should have shut down every human outpost, satellite, and ship from Pluto to the asteroid belt. Nothing happened. The pulse simply disappeared as it reached the first human installations near Pluto. The small research stations and defense outposts continued to function normally. In his command chair, Vexkar received the disturbing news with increasing agitation. "Impossible," he muttered. "Scan again. Our intelligence confirmed humans have no defense against this technology." The Zivnar science officer checked her screens over and over. "The pulse was completely absorbed, Admiral. I detect no effect on human systems." Just then, the communication system activated. On the main screen appeared the face of a human man. He wore a simple gray uniform and looked to be in his 30s with a friendly face and brown hair. "This is Captain Jason Lee of the patrol vessel Chuckles stationed near Pluto," the human said casually. "Just checking if that energy wave thing was an actual attack or if you guys were just saying hello. Hard to tell the difference." Vexkar stared at the human in shock. The vessel Chuckles was tiny, barely visible on their sensors. According to their intelligence, it was a simple patrol craft with minimal weapons and defenses. Yet it had completely ignored what should have been a devastating attack. "How?" Vexkar demanded. "How did you defend against our pulse weapon?" Captain Lee looked confused for a moment, then his face cleared in understanding. "Oh, that? We thought it was just some kind of communication signal." He smiled. "If that was supposed to be a weapon, you might want to check your equipment. Seemed pretty harmless from our end." The human's calm, almost amused response sent a wave of unease through the Zivnar bridge. Something was very wrong. The calculations, The intelligence, the predictions, none of it matched what was happening. "Admiral," the science officer said quietly, "I'm detecting unusual energy readings from all human installations. They appear to be using technology that doesn't match any of our records of their capabilities." Vexcar's star-filled eyes narrowed as he stared at the human captain still waiting patiently on the screen. "The prophecies cannot be wrong," he said, more to himself than to his crew. But a cold feeling of doubt was beginning to grow in his mind. Captain Lee smiled again. "So, what's next in this war of yours? We're all kind of curious down here." Grand Admiral Vexcar paced the bridge of his massive flagship. His forearms were clasped behind his back, and his blue skin had darkened to an almost purple shade, a sign of deep stress among the Zivnar. The first attack had failed completely. The humans had simply ignored it, treating a weapon that should have crippled their technology like a gentle breeze. "We must move to the second phase immediately," Vexcar ordered. "Prepare the quantum torpedoes. Target the Mars colony. His weapons." Officer worked quickly at her station. "Torpedoes ready, Admiral. Target locked on Mars colony central dome." The Zivnar Admiral nodded firmly. "Fire." From the crystal-like ships, glowing blue weapons shot toward the red planet. The quantum torpedoes were among the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. They could change matter at its smallest level, taking apart the very atoms of their targets. No known defense could stop them. The Zivnar had only used these weapons in tests before, never in actual conflict. The torpedoes raced toward Mars, where over 10 million humans lived in large domed cities. If they hit, the central dome would collapse, and thousands would die instantly. But halfway to their target, something strange happened. The torpedoes seemed to fold in on themselves. They twisted in space as if being pulled by an invisible hand. Then one by one they simply disappeared. On the bridge of the Zivnar flagship, alarms sounded. "What happened?" Vexcar demanded. "Where are the torpedoes?" The science officer checked her screens frantically. "They're gone, Admiral. They've vanished completely from our sensors. This is impossible." Inside the Mars Colony Operations Center, Governor Maria Sanchez was having a very different conversation. She was a middle-aged woman with dark hair streaked with gray and a calm, competent manner. She looked at the screen where Dr. Nathan Brown, head of the colony's Hobby Physics Club, was speaking. "Sorry about that, Governor," Brown said, looking slightly embarrassed. He was a tall, thin man with glasses and messy hair. Behind him, a group of scientists were gathered around what looked like a homemade device built from spare parts. "We've been testing that pocket dimension generator in our spare time, and it seems to have accidentally caught those torpedoes. Should we return them to the Zivnar? Seems rude to keep them." Sanchez sighed and rubbed her forehead. "This is why I told you all to register your experiments with Central Command, Nathan. Your hobby just intercepted weapons that were aimed at us. Well, technically they weren't intercepted. They're in a small pocket dimension about the size of a shoebox right now." He held up a small container where strange blue light swirled. "We can study them. The technology looks interesting, if a bit primitive." "And no," Sanchez added firmly, "I think we'll keep those, thank you, but please file a proper report this time." Brown nodded. "Will do, Governor. Oh, and by the way, my daughter's school class is asking if they can visit the Zivnar ships on their field trip next week. The kids are studying ancient space technology." "I'll check with command," Sanchez replied with a small smile. "But no promises." Back on the Zivnar flagship, panic was spreading. Their most powerful weapons had simply vanished. Their sensors were detecting technology from the humans that should not exist. According to all their information, humans were still mastering simple fusion power and basic space travel, but the evidence before them told a very different story. Grand Admiral Vexcar called an emergency meeting with the High Prophet, who had foretold the need to stop humanity. The Prophet was ancient even by Zivnar standards, with pale blue skin and eyes that seemed to see through time itself. The prophecies spoke of their primitive nature, the Prophet insisted, waving his thin arms to create glowing symbols in the air. They were to be simple creatures, barely able to harness fusion energy. Then explain, Vexkar hissed, pointing to a hologram showing images from Earth. The image showed what appeared to be a human child in a park, playing with what looked like a small black hole. The child was using it like a pet, throwing a ball which orbited the black hole before returning to the child's hand. Explain that. The High Prophet stared at the image in shock. That cannot be real. No species could harness singularity technology. For children's toys. Another officer approached nervously. Admiral, we're detecting strange energy readings throughout the human solar system. Their ships are appearing and disappearing at will. Some seem to be moving faster than light without entering hyperspace. Others are. It's like they're in multiple places at once. The High Prophet's hands trembled as he adjusted his viewing device. And this? What is this? He asked, pointing to another image from Earth. This image showed an ordinary grocery store where an elderly human woman was shopping. But as she reached for an item on a high shelf, her arm simply stretched, extending to twice its normal length. No one in the store seemed surprised or concerned by this. Unknown technology, High Prophet, the science officer admitted. It appears some humans can change their physical form at will. But how? The High Prophet whispered. How could they have developed such abilities without the Concord knowing? Grand Admiral Vexakar's face showed growing horror as more reports came in. Human ships were now visible all around his fleet, ships that had not been there moments before. Most were small, but sensors showed they contained energy signatures that dwarfed anything the Zivnar could produce. Could the prophecies be wrong? Vexkar asked finally, his voice low. The High Prophet seemed to shrink into himself. Perhaps the prophecies referred to a different species? Before Vexkar could respond, the communication system activated, again. This time it showed a human woman in a simple uniform. She had red hair and a friendly smile. Hello there. This is Captain Veronica Hill of the Earth vessel Laughter. We noticed you seem to be having some technical difficulties with your weapon systems. Would you like some assistance? Vexakar stared at the human. You offer help to the fleet that just tried to attack you? Captain Hill shrugged. Well, it wasn't much of an attack, to be honest, and we hate to see anyone struggling with outdated technology. We could send over some engineers if you'd like. Outdated? Vexkar repeated, his voice rising. The Zivnar have the most advanced technology in the known galaxy. Oh, Captain Hill looked genuinely surprised. You actually believe that? That's kind of sweet. Her expression turned sympathetic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that by human standards, your ships are rather, how can I put this nicely? Antique, like museum pieces. The bridge of the Zivnar flagship fell silent. Vexakar could feel the eyes of his crew on him, waiting for his response. But for the first time in his long military career, he had no idea what to do. The humans weren't afraid. They weren't even angry about being attacked. They were amused, as if the mighty Zivnar fleet was nothing more than a curious child playing with toys. I must consult with my leaders. Vexakar, finally, said Captain Hill, nodded cheerfully. Take your time. Oh, and we're broadcasting some Earth entertainment on all frequencies if you get bored. Classic comedy shows mostly. We thought you might enjoy learning about human humor while you're here. As the screen went dark, Vexakar turned to the High Prophet. What have we done? He asked quietly. The Prophet had no answer. 1 week had passed since the Zivnar declared war on humanity. In that time, they had launched 12 different attacks. They had used every weapon in their arsenal. Energy beams that could cut through moons, gravity weapons that could crush mountains, computer viruses designed to take over enemy systems. Nothing had worked. Not a single human had been harmed. Not one building had been damaged. Instead, each attack had been stopped in different ways. Some weapons had simply disappeared. Others had been turned into harmless light shows. The computer, viruses had been captured and placed in what humans called digital zoos for study. On Earth, life continued as normal. The war was treated more like an interesting science project than a threat. News programs gave daily updates on the latest failed Zivnar attack, often with humorous commentary. In the small town of Riverside, Iowa, a community barbecue was in full swing. People gathered in a green park, cooking food on grills and playing games. Among them was Dr. Frank Johnson, a retired quantum physicist who now spent most of his time with his grandchildren. Johnson was a friendly man in his 70s, with white hair and a quick smile. He stood at a grill cooking hamburgers while explaining the situation to his grandchildren and their friends. "You see, kids," he said, flipping a burger with an expert hand, "the Zivnar made a fundamental mistake." He glanced at his watch, which showed a glowing display of the solar system with the Zivnar fleet clearly marked. "They assumed we shared everything we knew when we joined the Concorde." 10-year-old Lisa Cooper looked up from her tablet computer where she was adjusting what appeared to be a complex simulation of alien shield technology. She had blonde hair and pigtails and bright, curious eyes. "That was pretty dumb of them, wasn't it, Grandpa?" Johnson laughed. "Well, to be fair, every other species did. The Concorde was built on open sharing of knowledge and technology." He placed cheese slices on several burgers. "But humans have always been a bit cautious." "You mean paranoid," said Lisa's older brother Ben, who was sitting at a nearby table. "Careful," Johnson corrected with a smile. "When we first reached the stars and saw all those alien civilizations, we decided it might be smart to keep some things to ourselves, just in case." He chuckled. "We ended up holding back about 95% of our technological capabilities. Standard procedure, really, dating back to our earliest days of international diplomacy." A soft beep came from Johnson's watch. He glanced at it. Looks like they're attempting a chronoton beam attack. That's new." He tapped a few commands on the watch face. "There, deflected. Sent it into a time loop. They'll figure it out eventually." "Can I have cheese on my burger, Grandpa?" asked Lisa. "Of course, sweetie. Anyone else want cheese?" As the family continued their normal day in orbit around Earth, the USS Laughter was engaging in a different kind of defense. The ship was not actually a warship at all. It was an old museum piece that had been hollowed out and kept around for show. The Concorde believed it was humanity's flagship, but in reality it was little more than a prop. Captain Veronica Hill sat in the command chair, her red hair tied back in a ponytail. She was young for a captain, only 35, but she had a natural talent for diplomacy and a great sense of humor, qualities that made her perfect for this particular assignment. "How's our broadcast going?" she asked her communications officer. "Reaching the entire Zivnar fleet, Captain," the officer replied. "We're currently sending them the complete collection of classic Earth comedy shows, starting with I Love Lucy, and working our way through the decades." Hill nodded with satisfaction. "Good. If they're going to sit out there looking confused, they might as well learn something about us." Her science officer approached with a tablet. "Captain, we're detecting unusual energy readings from the Zivnar flagship. It looks like they might be preparing for another attack." "What kind this time?" Hill asked, not particularly concerned. "Something big. They appear to be channeling power from all their ships into the main cannon on the flagship." Hill raised her eyebrows. "Well, that's new. Let Defense Command know, but I don't think we need to interrupt the barbecues down below." She stretched in her chair and looked at the main screen where the crystal-like Zivnar ships floated against the blackness of space. "You know, they really are beautiful ships. It's a shame they built them for war instead of exploration." Meanwhile, aboard the Zivnar flagship, Grand Admiral Vexkar was preparing for what he believed would be their final attempt to demonstrate their power to the humans. "Channel all power to the main cannon," he ordered, his voice tired but determined. "We will show them that the Zivnar are not to be mocked." For the past week, his mighty fleet had accomplished nothing except becoming the laughing stock of the human solar system. His crew was confused and demoralized. The High Prophet had locked himself away in meditation, trying to understand how the prophecies could have been so wrong. Vexkar had sent urgent messages back to the Zivnar homeworld, but it would take days for a response to reach him. In the meantime, he had to do something to save the honor of his people. "The cannon is charged, Admiral," his weapons officer reported. "Target?" Vexikar considered. They had tried attacking human outposts, defense stations, and colonies. None had worked. Perhaps a demonstration was needed instead. Target Earth's moon, he decided. We will remove a small piece of it, just enough to show our power without causing harm. The weapons officer programmed the coordinates. Ready, Admiral. Fire. A massive beam of energy shot from the Zivnar flagship toward Earth's moon. It was the most powerful weapon the Zivnar had ever built, capable of carving canyons and planets. The beam reached the moon and struck its surface. Nothing happened. The beam seemed to hit some kind of invisible barrier just above the moon's surface. It spread out across this barrier, creating beautiful patterns of light like ripples in a pond. On the Zivnar bridge, disbelief turned to shock. The beam is being absorbed, Admiral, the science officer reported. No damage to the lunar surface. Just then, the communication system activated. The screen showed a young human girl, the same Lisa Cooper who had been at the barbecue moments ago. Hi there, she said brightly. I'm Lisa. My science class is monitoring your attack as part of our homework assignment on energy conversion. That was a really cool light show, thanks. Vexikar stared at the child. This is impossible. That was our most powerful weapon. Lisa nodded seriously. It was pretty strong. We've added the energy to our storage system. It should help power the lunar colony for about, she looked off screen briefly, about 3 minutes. Not bad. A child, Vexikar whispered. They assigned a child to defend against our greatest weapon. Lisa's expression became sympathetic. Don't feel bad, Mr. Alien. My dad says your civilization is doing really well for your technological age. She smiled. Maybe someday you'll be as advanced as us. Keep trying. As the screen went dark, Vexikar sank into his command chair. His forearms hung limply at his sides. Send a message to the human authorities, he said quietly. Request a meeting to discuss terms. It was time to end this farce of a war before the Zivnar lost what little dignity they had left. On the 30th day of the war that wasn't really a war, Grand Admiral Vexikar prepared to meet with human leaders. The meeting would take place on Luna Base, Earth's settlement on the moon. Both sides had agreed this was neutral ground. Vexikar stood before a mirror in his quarters, adjusting his formal armor. The blue-skinned alien looked tired. His star-filled eyes had dimmed somewhat from the stress of the past month. Everything he had believed about humans, everything his civilization had taught about them, had been proven wrong. Admiral, it is time, said his aide, a younger Zivnar named Kelnar. Vexikar nodded. Is the High Prophet ready? Yes, Admiral, though he is still disturbed by recent events. Vexikar could understand why. The High Prophet's entire purpose was to see the future and guide the Zivnar accordingly. His failure to correctly predict human capabilities had shaken the very foundation of their society. The Zivnar delegation took a small shuttle to Luna Base. As they approached, they could see it was a large dome-shaped structure built into a crater. It looked simple and functional from the outside, not particularly impressive by galactic standards. After they landed and went through a simple airlock, Vexikar was surprised by what they found inside. Luna Base was like a garden paradise. Trees and plants grew everywhere. Water flowed in small streams and fountains. The ceiling of the dome showed a perfect image of Earth, hanging beautiful and blue in the black sky. Welcome to Luna Base, said a human guide. The meeting will take place in the central garden. Please follow me. As they walked, Vexikar noticed human children playing, adults working or relaxing, and everyone going about their day as if a hostile alien fleet wasn't orbiting their world. No one seemed afraid or even particularly interested in the Zivnar visitors. The central garden was a large open space with a round table in the middle. Around the table stood several humans in various forms of dress. Some wore uniforms, others casual clothes. They were talking and laughing as if at a party rather than a diplomatic meeting that would decide the future relationship between their species. Admiral Alan Carter stepped forward. He held a glass filled with a clear liquid and smiled warmly. Welcome. Glad you could make it, he said, raising his glass slightly. Drink? We've synthesized some traditional Zivnar spirits if you'd prefer. Vexakar was taken aback by the casual greeting. He had expected a formal, tense negotiation. Instead, it felt like he was being welcomed to a social gathering. Thank you, he said, accepting a glass from a waiter. He took a small sip and was surprised to find it was indeed a perfect recreation of a rare Zivnar drink usually reserved for special occasions. Please sit, Carter gestured to the chairs around the table. We have much to discuss. As the meeting began, Vexkar found himself struggling to understand the humans' attitude. They showed no anger over the attacks on their world, no fear of the Zivnar fleet, just a kind of amused patience as if dealing with confused children. I do not understand your species, Admiral, Vexkar finally said after some initial pleasantries. We declared war on you. We tried to destroy your outposts, your colonies, and you responded with amusement. Carter nodded thoughtfully. Tell me, Admiral, why did you actually attack us, and please, the real reason this time. Vexakar's skin shifted colors slightly, a sign of discomfort among his kind. He looked at the High Prophet, who nodded slowly, encouraging honesty. We were afraid, Vexakar admitted. Our deep time calculations showed that within 1 millennium, humanity would surpass all other species combined in power and influence. We believed preemptive action was necessary. And now? Carter asked quietly. Now we realize our calculations were actually correct in predicting your potential, but wrong about the timeline. Vexkar gestured with his 4 arms in a sign of surrender. You've already surpassed us perhaps centuries ago. Yet you joined the Conquered as a junior member, accepted our limitations, and played along with our assumptions. Carter smiled. Earth has a long history of diverse cultures meeting one another. Sometimes, when a technologically advanced society encounters a less advanced one, the results have been unpleasant. We learned from our mistakes. He took a sip from his glass. When we reached the stars and found the Conquered, we studied it carefully. We saw a peaceful galaxy, but one where technology and power were shared openly. We decided it might be wiser to keep some things to ourselves while we assess the situation. Why not reveal yourselves now? Asked the High Prophet. Why maintain this deception? A woman in a simple blue suit, Ambassador Susan Miller, answered. Imagine if we had joined the Conquered and immediately shown all our capabilities. How would the other species have reacted to a newcomer that was suddenly the most powerful force in the galaxy? The High Prophet nodded slowly. Fear, suspicion, perhaps even a united front against you. Exactly, Carter said. We wanted to be accepted as equals, not feared as superiors, so we held back. We showed only the technology that put us roughly on par with the average Conquered member. Vexkar leaned forward. Then why reveal yourselves now? You could have simply deflected our attacks without showing your true capabilities. Carter smiled. This war of yours gave us the perfect opportunity to gradually reveal our true capabilities without causing a panic throughout the Conquered. A sort of controlled revelation. He gestured around them. Also, to be honest, we were getting tired of pretending. Maintaining 2 separate technology levels, one for show and one for actual use, was becoming complicated. Ambassador Miller added, plus our children were having trouble remembering what they could and couldn't talk about with alien visitors. You saw how excited Lisa Cooper was to discuss your attack with you. Vexkar looked stunned. All this was diplomatic consideration? Of course, replied Carter. We've been ready to fully join galactic society as equals for some time now. We just needed the right moment. He extended his hand, a human gesture of agreement. So, shall we discuss the real terms of the peace? And perhaps how humanity and the Zivnar might collaborate on some interesting projects I have in mind? The High Prophet spoke up. My people have much to learn from yours, it seems. Not just about technology, but about wisdom and patience. Carter nodded. And we have much to learn from you as well, The Zivnar understanding of art and culture is remarkable. We would love to explore cultural exchange programs. As the details of the new relationship between humanity and the galaxy were negotiated, news spread throughout Earth. Humanity's big secret was finally out, and most humans responded exactly as they had to the declaration of war 1 month earlier. They laughed, shook their heads, and went about their day. In Riverside, Iowa, Dr. Frank Johnson read the news on his advanced tablet while his grandchildren played nearby. "Grandpa?" asked Lisa Cooper, looking up from where she was playing with a small robot. "Now that aliens know we're super advanced, will things change?" Johnson considered the question. "Some things will change, yes. We won't have to pretend anymore, which will be nice. But the important things will stay the same." "Like what?" the girl asked. "Like barbecues and baseball games and school and family," he said with a smile. "The things that make us human." Lisa nodded seriously, then brightened. "Does this mean I can take my pet black hole to show and tell now?" Johnson laughed and ruffled her hair. "We'll see, kiddo, we'll see. In the great scheme of the universe, the month-long war would eventually be remembered as little more than a footnote in history, the time when a proud ancient species tried to conquer humanity and discovered that appearances can be very deceiving. And humans, being humans, would never let the Zivnar forget it. The end."